All right, I don't know what time it is on your clock, but I know what I'm getting ready for. It is time for the Professional CISO Podcast with David Malaco.
Welcome, one and all, to the Professional CISO Podcast. I'm your host, David Malaco. This show is an exploration of the topics necessary to move the CISO role forward. Today, our guest is Michael Jenks, CTO of Interpres Security. Before we get started, I want to do some shout outs. We do have founding sponsors for the podcast, Interpres Security being one of them. The other is ContraForce. These folks have seen the vision from the very beginning, and we truly appreciate their support early on in our process. And now, let's talk about being a professional CISO. In today's episode, our guest is Michael Jenks, CTO and co-founder of Interpres Security. Previously, Jenks supported various three-letter agencies and founded Adapt Forward, which was a defense contracting company. Jenks has done a lot of stuff for the U.S. government that he can't talk about. He was part of Adapt Forward, and it was recognized as an Inc. 500 company where they specialized in offensive and defensive cybersecurity operations. Please welcome Michael Jenks.
David, thank you for having me.
Great to have you here today. All right, Jenks, can you go into your 1 minute history? Let's talk about Michael Jenks, maybe even from a kid all the way through to kind of your professional career today. Give me that 1 minute.
So, grew up central Pennsylvania, small town, all about football, really, sports oriented. So, anyway, graduated high school and thought I was going to go play football at the collegiate level. Found out that, I am 5'8", and I am pretty quick, but, there's a lot of other larger people that are just as quick at that level.
Right.
So figured I'd probably pivot and focus on studies. Ended up at a technical college, Pennsylvania College of Technology. At the time, they were offering some very interesting courses around computer technology. This is late 90s, early 2000s. And that's how I ended up with a degree in, actually it was a bachelor's degree in network communications with a concentration in, security, right? So off to the races, working at a dial-up ISP. Back in the day, Chili Tech, shout out to Chili Tech. We were competing with AOL back in the day.
Right.
Once I graduated college, threw my resume out to try to get a big boy job. Ended up at L3 Communications, which was phenomenal. It was basically just a small team. I was running the operation, but we did everything from running cables through the ceiling, right, to firewalls, network configs, system administration, security, all the things. So that really laid the foundation across my technology background to then focus and pivot into a concentration in cybersecurity.
Excellent. We want to make sure that we're keeping to the title of the podcast, right? So the professional CISO. So I want to come out of the gate with kind of that question around what are you seeing sitting in your current position as a vendor CTO on elevating that CISO role, right? So what are you seeing? What are your observations? What are you seeing out there in the world?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm seeing out there in the world is it should be getting better. It should be getting easier, right? We're how many years into this cybersecurity field, and there's just a continual wave and onslaught of more breaches. I mean, to a higher degree, more very, very, very bad, right? Compromises on national levels, right? On critical infrastructure levels, right? So with all of these cybersecurity companies, right? With all of this technology, it should be getting easier, and it's not. It's getting way worse. So why is that? I mean, it really gets into the sprawl of technology, different ecosystems that not playing with each other. I mean, these large global environments, there's just so much attack surface, right, to focus on. There are, ways to measure risk, right? There's compliance, right? But I think we all can come to the conclusion, now that compliance, right, and check box methodology really does not secure you from a tactical level.
Right. So, boiling it down, compliance is not security, right? So linked to the business. So we talk about the sprawl. We talk about, of course, you're going to have a perspective around the technical aspects as a CTO. So I don't want to take you too far off your center. But as far as the need for, let's say, a CISO being a technical role or seen as a technical role, but now advancing into that business realm of things. Are you seeing the need? Are you seeing the evolution? What may be lacking potentially?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, I mean, the CISO needs a seat at the big boy table.
Right.
Right. They own a critical component of these businesses. Right. So it should not be just left to the board, to the CEO, right, to the CIO. Right. The CISO is essentially the scapegoat. Right. That's got to stop. They need to elevate themselves, because these days you don't just get a get out of jail free card. If the security is not implemented correctly, is not taken seriously, that is a huge risk, right, to the livelihood and the potential end of your business if you're not executing that correctly.
So I heard you say quantify there in one of the earlier answers. Where are you thinking as a technical leader in the vendor space around quantification, particularly quantification of risk or quantification of threats?
Yeah, I mean, different ways to quantify things, right? So there's qualitative, right? So, and I think a lot of CISOs are in that realm currently, right? So
because it's easy.
Yep.
Let's be honest.
Well, I mean,
it is comparatively.
Yeah, sure. I'll agree with that. And really, it's, let's say, hand wavy at best, right? I can't really measure. These formulas are, I can massage them, kind of make them look and feel, how I want to, make everybody feel warm and fuzzy.
Right.
But in the reality is, it ain't warm and fuzzy out there, right? As we discussed previously. So what we're bringing to the table, right, is a way to quantitatively measure risk as it relates to threat you'll most likely encounter, right? Which is the way we're trying to help these CISOs quantify, right, their risk exposure.
So do you see Interpres Security as a piece of the larger risk quantification picture?
Absolutely, right? We're not, the entire recipe, right? But we are a strong component of the recipe. And we feel like what we're bringing to the table is, again, a way to quantitatively measure changes on the adversarial side, but also the defensive side, right? To allow organizations to understand, as these changes occur, the type of risk exposure that either is improving or degrading over time. That allows these CISOs to quantitatively make informed decisions about their threat exposure.
So we kind of backed into it a little bit, but I want to make sure that I hit this one, pretty hard, which is, I call things for what they are. Interpres is one of our sponsors, one of our founding sponsors, and again, truly appreciate that. But at the same time, I don't want to put on airs as to say, oh, we're just this 30-minute infomercial for these guys. So why should we care? Why should we care what Interpres is doing? Why, me as a CISO, why should I be interested in what you're doing and where you guys are headed down your path?
Yeah, great question. And really, it's the foundation of why Interpres. Why did we found the company? Because it works. And really, we want to help people. Look, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, it's not getting better, it's getting worse. But in a previous role in the previous company, we developed this methodology. And really, it's a blend of a lot of things, right? It's operationalizing threat-informed defense. It's situational awareness, internal and external, right? It's measuring things quantitatively related back to the threats that matter most to you, right? So we know this works because I've seen it work, and I can't get into the details, right? But we've systematically destroyed three-letter agency red teams, that came in to try to assess us. We've, successfully defended, against various nation-state actors, et cetera. And this was all done manually. So what we're bringing to the table is a productized version of that methodology, right? That we can just plug and play that allows that systematic quantitative capability to be implemented in everybody's back door or backyard.
I want to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Interpres Security. Interpres optimizes defenses to help CISOs and security teams focus on the threats that matter most and reduce their threat exposure. The Interpres Threat Exposure Management Platform analyzes the dynamic relationship between the defense surface, adversarial tactics, techniques, and procedures, and exploitable vulnerabilities that are likely to be used to attack an organization. With continuous monitoring, organizations know exactly how well they are prepared for existing and breaking events. To see Interpres in action and to learn how you can gain an unbiased view of your security posture and defend against the most relevant security threats and vulnerabilities, visit www.interpressecurity.com/HVM. We appreciate Interpres Security support as a foundation sponsor of the Professional CISO podcast. Check them out today. So as a CISO, me personally, I'm a strong believer, I say believer, but also advocate for automation, right? If we don't have enough folks, we don't have enough qualified folks, generally speaking, we can get it. That's another argument, another podcast for sure. But to be able to say, I need to rely on automation to be able to really supercharge my team, be able to get them in a place where I can accomplish things that I had not been able to accomplish before. How does your approach help with that?
You hit it right on the head with that question, right? It's all about automation. And why? It's because everybody has this issue. And what is this issue? It's as these breach reports are released, as these CISA advisories are released, that's a very manual process that's joint, cross-team collaboration, which takes anywhere from days to weeks for organizations to understand the risk exposure to that latest threat. So the general workflow is, an advisory breach report is released, a threat intel team brings that down, parses out all the pertinent information, right? Techniques, vulnerabilities, mitigations, detections. They hand that to an ops team that has to log into every individual tool set to understand, config, mitigations. Do we have the proper detections in place, right? Very manual, time intensive, static in nature. Not enough time, not enough resources. There's upwards of 800 of these that are released every year. It's impossible to keep up. So automation, right, is the key.
Gotcha. Okay. So maybe the next piece that I would want to look into that my brain goes to is tech sprawl. It concerns me as a CISO that there are so many tools. You can walk into any given place. Let's say you're a replacement CISO, right? I think I can't remember the stat, but the stat that I'm hearing is somewhere around the 60 tools or something like that. Is there are you seeing in the near future, again, from your biased position, a play in consolidation, some cost savings?
Totally. Definitely a few angles there, right? So you have new CISOs coming into a new role. I just want to understand the lay of the land, understand what tools are in place, what are the capabilities, but then also M&A, right? So as you're acquiring other companies, they have like kind tech stacks, just to understand, maintain that awareness across the board. What we're able to do is allow you to have insight as to the value that these tool sets are providing, with regard to that threat-informed defense methodology. What coverage do they provide against, threat actor groups, malware families, adversarial techniques, campaigns, et cetera. So again, you'll be able to, identify overlap, identify areas of concern that at that point you have now an informed procurement decision to make to fill that critical gap. So various angles that you could leverage Interpres to scratch that itch.
So 2 more questions on that front. Security control validation. Do you guys play in that space at all? It sounds like there's some potential crossover there.
Yeah. So from a validation perspective, right, we're more centered around the same outcome, right? So, I would say traditionally validation is more around the breach and attack simulation, targeted penetration tests, red team events, et cetera. But that's difficult, right? That's super difficult to holistically, continuously.
I'm hearing a lot of labor there.
Yeah, a lot of labor, a lot of deployment, struggles, right? So to deploy that holistically across an enterprise, tough, right? So what we're able to do is provide a very lightweight solution via read-only API that maintains that holistic situational awareness. And really, it's a symbiotic relationship because now we would be able to provide the information to allow a very detailed, tailored scoping of areas to focus on for breach and attack, for validating, hey, that thing is going to fire, an alert when we think it is, scoping, what adversaries, should we simulate from a red team event, et cetera. Same goal, outcome, and very symbiotic relationship, with that.
So you're not a breach and attack killer per se.
No.
But you would be able to leverage your tool if you're not necessarily looking to jump both feet into breach and attack potentially.
Totally.
Okay. The next piece that I would say, the next question of the two, if I know my, Gartner and Forrester well enough, I'm not hearing or seeing that this is a place where you guys line up exactly in one of their categories. So what are your categories? If you're, if somebody's looking and saying, hey, I need to really look at a line item on my budget for this, or take out a tool or something like that. Is this a net new ad? Is this can I take out some other things? Where do you guys sit in the category side?
Yeah, so there is a new category that Gartner is kind of shaping right at the moment. It's named Continuous Threat Exposure Management.
Okay.
In that category, you'll find tools such as vulnerability scanners, vulnerability management, attack surface management, external, internal. You have breach and attack simulation, tools, et cetera. But what they point out in that white paper, right, where they're trying to shape this quadrant is all of these tools in their own right, they provide fantastic information, but there's no context, right? There's no intelligence layer that's weaving all of that story together with your existing, cybersecurity tool sets, let's say an EDR, a network sensor, firewalls, cloud security, et cetera, with, that, again, threat monitoring per se. We feel that we are in that continuous threat exposure management space, but we are that platform that weaves together that holistic story between all of these tool sets to provide the context that helps organizations prioritize and make informed decisions and quantitatively measure improvement or degradation against the ever-evolving threat landscape.
And again, my brain always goes back to now that's a pretty large piece of the cyber risk quantification equation. So it sounds to me like you guys are setting yourself up to really help drive that conversation. I'm excited to hear and see what you guys come up with next as far as helping that. Their future podcast, by the way, everyone, is cyber risk quantification. It's coming. I can tell you, I've having been out there on LinkedIn with 2 different posts, it has the highest level of engagement that I've had of any of my posts. So I want to kind of ramp down a little bit here. So what are some of the key points that you see from your unique position that you would, recommendations for CISOs moving forward as they professionalize, right? Just like as a person in the field, as an executive in the field, right? Where are you seeing that we need to take ourselves? What would you if you were sitting? Well, oh, wait a minute. You're sitting with a CISO. Like, what would you tell me? Like, what do I need to be thinking about, Jinx?
I think threat first, right? And again, that's coming from experience to where it just works, right? So, everybody's going to tell you, concentrate on everything. Everything's going to come kill you, right? Where, that's probably not true, right? There's high probability that, certain threat actor groups are going to target you versus others, right? Again, time, resources, not enough of them. So it's really about prioritization and focus. And we like to, push that threat methodology, threat-informed defense.
Right.
So that's But again, it's not just, pushing a threat-informed defense methodology. It's pushing that forward with a quantitative way to measure right improvement, right? So, getting, from a tactic, technique, procedure, threat group, malware, prioritizing based on your threat profile. What's that mean, right? It's, what industry vertical are you associated with? Size of the organization, geolocation operations, types of data you protect internally, PHI, PII, let's say you have some secret sauce formula, right? Type of platforms that you have in the environment, right? All of that is really gonna allow you to prioritize the threats that you'll most likely encounter. Once you have that, well, now you can take proactive measures to systematically burn down that risk from a prioritized sense based on your threat profile, which is a bespoke methodology, right? Because again, all about time and resources.
I like how you dove into the informed part of that, right? What are the components of that informed piece? So I would recommend, rewinding about 15 seconds and maybe 30 seconds and re-listening to that because he broke it down quite well. So there's those components that you need to think about relative to being informed about the threats. All right, Jinx, now comes to the fun part of the interview. I have 10 questions, standard questions that I ask all my guests. And ultimately what I want to do is I want to humanize your story. And through your relatively short answers to these, it will allow our audience to know you better. All right, so 10 questions. What's your favorite word?
Probably bruh.
Bruh. What's your least favorite word?
Compliance.
What area of your work do you find most interesting?
The puzzles, right? Figuring out, gamer, right? So it's all about figuring out the puzzles and the mystery and figuring out, really hard problems.
What area of your work do you find most challenging?
I would say product management is a new challenging role for myself.
Okay. What sound or noise do you love?
White noise, for sure.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Say dogs barking, because I get a lot of it as I work from home.
Understood.
And I'm, in the middle of my calls.
Right. What's your favorite curse word?
Oof, that would, it depends, right? Depends on what I'm responding to. Like if it's just something that went kind of bad, it's, it's like shit, Yeah. But if I'm reading, let's say, the latest hack, some major, event that happens, that's more like, fuck.
Yeah, I got you. What profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt?
Oh man, I love cryptocurrency, and I had an opportunity, and I before this, to go run a hedge fund for cryptocurrency trading.
Nice.
So Web3.
What profession would you not like to do?
I would say anything to do with human feces.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yep. And the final question: if heaven exists, what would you like to hear your God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Yeah. Heaven is real, and I would like him to say, "Well done, good and faithful servant."
Awesome. Awesome. All right. In this episode, we covered quantifying the threat, readiness, tech sprawl, automation. We also talked about Michael Jenks and what they're doing over there at Interpret Security and how they're impacting the world today. If you're a CISO, I think it is imperative that you understand what innovation is happening and have the ability to stay out on that forefront and listen to what these folks are saying. So it's not just a sales pitch that you're getting, that you're actually understanding where our industry is going, and that's how you stay and become and stay a professional. So, colleagues and friends, I renew the call. We must professionalize our role. Until next time, I wish you success, happiness, and health in your endeavor to become the professional CISO. Let's do this.
We're professionalizing the CISO role, so please subscribe to the Professional CISO Podcast.